Hello, and welcome to the So You Want to Be a Marine Biologist podcast, where we learn about the ocean, share sea stories, and explore ocean careers. I'm your host, Kara Muzia. Let's dive into today's episode. This episode is brought to you by you. Thank you to those of you who have become patrons of the So You Want to Be a Marine Biologist podcast. For less than the cost of a dive tank refill, or a cup of coffee, you can help keep the podcast episodes coming. There's also some fun bonuses for patrons, so be sure to check those out at patreon.com/marinebiolife. That's patreon.com/marinebiolife. Hello, mermaids, pirates, ocean lovers, and land lovers. Welcome to today's show. Why didn't the sailor play cards? Because the captain was standing on the deck. My guest today is Elisama Menesez. She specializes in marine shipping for WWF Canada. In today's episode, Ellie shares how, growing up in Brazil, the ocean played an integral part in her life and how she created a program that helps more people connect with the sea. We also chat about the importance of social and managerial aspect of marine science and how shipping plays a role in our changing climate. We also discuss how this industry influences those who call the sea home, both above and below the ocean's surface. Please enjoy. Ellie, welcome to the So You Want to Be a Marine Biologist podcast. I'm really excited to chat with you today.
Thank you. I'm so happy to be here. Oh my God, I can't believe I'm in a podcast.
Super fun. So before we kind of jump in a little bit, I'm really, really excited to chat with your work. It's very different from anything that we've talked about on the podcast before. Could you share a little bit about what WWF Canada is and kind of the goals behind it?
Yes, sure. So WWF stands for World Wildlife Fund. It is a global organization, and we have offices in Canada. And our main goal is conservation. And we focus mainly on ways through which people in nature can thrive and nature-based solutions for a number of issues related to conservation and environmental work. We have offices in Toronto, Ottawa, Halifax, St. John's, Nunavut, BC, and other smaller offices in Canada. And my work is related to the wildlife and industry team. And this team is basically focused on ways through which industry can find ways to support and also sustainable ways to exist with, wildlife and nature. So we work with shipping, fishing, mining, and many other industries to understand how these industries can do better in terms of sustainability.
I love it. And we're going to dive more into that. But you mentioned you're in Canada, but you're originally from Brazil. So growing up in Brazil, how did you get interested in ocean and ocean science? And how did you make the leap to Canada? That's quite the change.
Yeah. Okay. So even though I was born and raised in a community in Salvador, Bahia, northeast of Brazil, that it is a coastal city, but where I was living, it was quite hard to get to the beach and to the water. It was a very vulnerable community in terms of social vulnerability, economic vulnerability. But I've always felt connected to the ocean. I remember every summer, my aunt would go to a friend's house in an island close to my city, and that would be the best time that I can remember from my childhood. So I always have this connection that I truly believe the connection to the ocean, nature, it goes beyond the physical contact. I like to say that it's something that it's a memory that it's not only our memory, it comes from our ancestors and has so many layers to it. So growing up in that community, I've always felt like we did not have enough green space. It was a slum in Brazil, right? So you have like houses built on top of all the houses, and you don't have parks, you don't have trees. I've always missed it. That was one of the motivations I had as a kid, was to get connected with nature, even though I was not growing up around it.
Mm.
Throughout my journey, trying to find this connection in a more direct way, I became volunteer in many organizations. I also started my own organization with a couple of friends. We still work on this organization in Brazil. And I went to school to study oceanography. Couldn't be another another field, because I really love the ocean and I choose it as my career. And then after I finished school, I wanted to have a more political and social approach to oceanography. It
Mm.
was very like sciencey heavy, like it was heavily in science, everything that I learned in school. And I want to have a more political approach to the matters related to the ocean. So I came to Canada to do my master's in marine management. And then, as part of my program, I got an internship with WWF Canada. And I started as an intern, and I've been there for almost 2 years. After the internship, I continued the work that I was doing. And yeah, that's basically how I arrived here.
Wonderful. So there's a couple of things that you kind of brushed over that I would really like to unpack a little bit. What is
Okay.
this organization that you and your friends started in Brazil?
Okay, this organization is called Educamares, which, if we could translate, would be something like Educacis, which is focused on marine education. And we use sports and arts as a way to connect people with the ocean. So, I mean, I am biased to say that, but it's a beautiful project because we, for the first time, work with dancers and artists, musicians, and all these people who most of the time speak different language. They are all together to talk about one thing: the marine environment and the connection that people have, but sometimes, they don't remember, and therefore they are not aware of how important it is.
Mm.
So the focus of our work is really to connect people. We believe that the reason why we sometimes don't care much about what happens to the ocean, or we don't connect how the ocean influences so much of our daily lives, is because we don't understand it. But
Mhm.
beyond the understanding of the science behind it is the feelings, it's the, that connection that I was talking about at the beginning. We believe that through arts and sports, you can create memories. And we think memories are a very powerful way that people can connect and care about. Because once you have a memory of that space and you create that connection through that memory, it is really hard for you to not take it personal,
Mm.
right? To not see the ocean as an extension of yourself, because
Yeah.
now it's part of your memory. So that's the work that we do. It's completely different of the work that I do here. I'm not gonna lie, it's very artistic and plays with many different tools that I don't necessarily do here with my work at WWF. So it balances super well.
Yeah, that's really cool. And it's a really good point that, it kind of goes back to the quote, you protect what you love, right? If you have that memory, if you
Exactly.
have that sentimentality of a place or an experience on the ocean, you want to protect it because you want to be able to preserve how it was in your memory or make it better.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly.
It's very powerful.
Hmm.
So you mentioned that you went to school for oceanography and decided that you wanted to take a more political approach. And we kind of touched a little bit about this before we hit the record button, but could you explain a little bit more about why you shifted away from the really sciencey aspect of it and more into the political realm of ocean conservation?
Yeah, I think that beginning of my life at that community gave me a lot of social interactions and social experience.
Mm-hmm.
And I carry it in everything that I do. Doesn't matter how sciencey I want to be, I always have this social background
Mm-hmm.
that it's not, I mean, I can't really be a reference because I never went to school. I don't know the tools, but I have that personal experience. I care very much about how what I know
Mm-hmm.
will influence or empower people, and who are these people? For me, who are these people is a very important question that move everything that I do. So after I have all the knowledge that I had about the ocean, I found myself asking, okay, what can I do with it? And for whom? Like who can benefit? Who needs to be benefited from this knowledge? And then it brought me back to these communities. They are in the front line of climate change, of, the destruction of mangroves in Brazil, for instance, and other places. These communities, they hold so much knowledge and practices, but they are not the ones being heard, or they are not the ones who are actually representing the work related to the marine life. So I I realized that, it has to be political.
Mm-hmm.
I cannot really detach it from science, because the science that I have right now, or the knowledge that I have right now, it's just one layer. And there's this huge word with like traditional communities, indigenous communities in Brazil and all over the world that, they needed to be in the front line of this conversation. That was my motivation to bring more of the social and political aspect, because I couldn't find throughout my career in oceanography that representation, and I thought was important.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And it's really, really is important. We can kind of get into the scientific echo chamber, right? Once you're in the scientific community, especially marine science, it's really small and you can kind of just get tucked in there and you get into your own little echo chamber and you don't really expand out of it. And the problem is that the communities and the people that need to hear a message and that would benefit from the science are outside of this little niche. So it's important to kind of branch out of it.
Yeah, totally. I think there was also a moment where I was connecting the dots about colonization on land and what's happening right now in the ocean, right? When we're thinking about the open sea, which is that area that nobody is responsible for, but everyone can actually do whatever they want there. When I start to think about it, I connect the dots about, wow, what happened on land is happening right now in the ocean, because the only nations that can actually access the open ocean are nations that are developed, they have like economic power.
Hmm.
But all other nations, most of them don't even know what is really going on, what they're extracting from these so-called open ocean. And that realization that I was perhaps in a different year, different like century, but seeing the same strategy being played, made me really think that I wanted to be part of that game, but playing in the side of awareness, bringing, the conversation to these other countries and trying to understand how we can not repeat the same things we did on land in the ocean. How can we take all the knowledge we have right now of what not to do in terms of colonizing places and peoples, and not do the same in the ocean? There was a point as well that really moved me towards a more political and social aspect of the ocean.
Mm. It's a really interesting perspective that it makes total sense and I hadn't really thought about it before is we're colonizing the ocean similarly to how we colonized on land and that it's a few of the power players and it's the same ones that are kind of doing the work. But before we get into all that, you mentioned that you got a degree in marine management.
Yeah.
So what did that look like? what did your coursework kind of look like? And what did that really start to shift your perspective in?
Oh, that's a great question. So I think that work was very hands-on, which was completely different of what I experienced before.
Mm.
Was very project-based and teamwork. And one of the things that I liked the most about the program was that was very, was related to things and issues that we are facing right now. So I felt like I was learning about and I was trying to understand solutions to problems that we are facing right now. So I think marine management, and depends of the program that you are doing, where you are doing it, can be a very good way to be exposed to complex problems because anything related to the ocean it's extremely complex
Mhm.
in a way that you can work with your peers to understand what are the tools you have to address that problem.
Mhm.
And that's what I did during my master's, was very hands-on in that sense of having teams and groups where I would be exposed to situations and case studies, and throughout our program understand the tools we could apply to address the problems we're exposed to. So that's, I think, a way that I would synthesize it. But one aspect of this program that I think I liked the most was the opportunity to have internship as part of your master's.
Mm.
So that's what some people call this type of program a professional master's. Even though
Mhm.
you have to write a paper, you have this very like professional and applied
Mhm.
portion of the program, and that's how I got into WWF. So that was one of the best things I would say about this program, and needed, because after a couple of years studying oceanography in academia, I was really looking for something more applied and hands-on.
Yeah, yeah, and I think that's a really excellent point. A lot of undergrad and master's program is so much about just get the grades, write the paper, and get out, and a lot, and then what, right? You hear about people not being able to find jobs, so it's a really powerful way to get experience while you're in school. Is a really great way to get a job that you really want. But it's great that your program requires that because it makes that a very practical learning experience and then helps you get a job
Yeah.
afterwards.
Totally, totally. And I think at the beginning you talked about, that bubble, right? The academic bubble. And I think when you have these programs that trying to balance a professional component to your degree, it helps you to be connected to what's going on in the real world,
Mhm.
right? Because academia can be quite behind in some aspects of practicality of marine issues. I think that was a very good strategy the program had, and I'm really glad I was there.
Yeah. Why did you go to Canada for it though? Because you got your undergrad in New York, right?
Hey, Kara here. I hear it all the time. How do I become a marine biologist? Or my niece wants to help the ocean. Where does she even start? I hear from students, yes, and also nurses, HR professionals, and other mid career folks who wonder if they could still make their dream of working with sea turtles or sharks come true, wondering if it's too late to answer the ocean's call. Here's what I've learned after 20 years in the field and hundreds of interviews. There's no straight line, no magic degree, and no gatekeeper. You create the path forward. If this sounds overwhelming and vague, I've created 2 tools to help you stop wondering what if and start moving forward with clarity and purpose. The first is my free guide, Be a Marine Biologist Without the Degree. Over 1,000 people have already downloaded this guide and taken their first step towards ocean impact. Inside, you'll find 7 concrete, doable actions to help you get started, whether you're just exploring or ready to make a change. Then there's the Ocean Blueprint. This is a 30-day self-paced course that helps you build your unique path into ocean science and conservation without quitting your job or going back to school. Inside the Ocean Blueprint, you'll get daily prompts to explore your interests, skills, and next steps, a structure that turns overwhelm into real momentum, and a bonus section to root your work into ocean connection. You don't have to wait for a degree, a perfect plan, or permission. Whether you're wading in or ready to take the deep dive, these tools are here to help you move from dreaming to doing. The ocean called. Are you ready to answer? Links in the show notes and on my website, karagracemuzia.com. I can't wait to see the waves you'll make.
Well, half of my undergrad was in Brazil, half in New York. Yeah, so the Brazilian government had a program called Science Without Border, and basically selected a couple of students in Brazil that would go to, my case, to the US, others went to other countries, and they would sponsor you to take classes in a university related to your degree. And so I went to New York and I studied for 1.5 years. For 1 year, in New York, and I also did an internship in Hawaii as part of this program. So it was like a whole package. And then I finished it in Brazil. The reason why I chose Canada was really the program and also the fact that the program was in a university that was in a coastal city, because for me it was really important to be studying about the ocean in a place where I could see the ocean. But the program, and again that aspect of being able to work while I was studying was quite important to me.
That's a really good point. Choosing the program, you kind of make it from the beginning.
Yeah. And also I think, I don't like to romanticize academia. It can be quite hard. It depends of who you are, what you want, but it can be really hard to be there and be true to yourself and be true to your goals and your passion. Your passion, I think it's something that's really important. And throughout the process of getting a degree, sometimes the passion is not taken into consideration. I think when you make a decision that's related to a program, when things get hard, it's easier to go back to that state of, okay, I selected and I know why I selected and I know what I want from it. Whereas I think if your criteria to do a program is about the place or other criteria, it can get a bit hard. Academia is such to require from you an effort that sometimes it's beyond what you think you can offer. It can be a struggle.
Yep, absolutely. I think that's a really good point, is knowing that, having your why. And and it's important in anything that you do in life. If you do something, you should have your reasons for it. You don't have to share them with anybody else, but knowing why you're doing this. And, going to school isn't just something that should be taken lightly. It's a lot of time and money, and you should have a concrete reason why you're doing it and why you selected that program. Because it's going to get hard. It should be hard. Otherwise everybody would do it, right? So being able to revert back to that why is clutch.
Yeah, and the mental health, right? I think you need, again, like great the way you say that your why needs to be stronger than all the mental health issues you can face throughout, because you will. Everyone, almost everyone does. Like, you have research showing it that, most of the people doing the master's and PhD all over the world. So it's not a matter of really background. It's what you are doing that requires so much from you that we need to be aware of it and have a strong sense of our goals and what moves us, our passion in that case.
Yeah, excellent points. So we have gone really off the rails, but I really like our conversation. So let's get back to the high seas. So could you please explain? So we have in the U.S. we have states, right? So we go 3 miles offshore. That's kind of state boundaries or national waters, and then what is it? 17 miles offshore is considered international waters. Is that the law?
Well, it really depends. So these area that you're gonna define as part of the what we call EEZ, the exclusive economic zone, it depends of some aspects of the coastal line of this continent or this country, right? So let's say in Brazil, if you look this area, the EEZ in Brazil, in some parts they are very narrow, like it's not that big. But when you go closer to the Amazon, you have like this huge portion that gets like into the Atlantic, and it's called as part of the Brazilians' territory. And the reason for that is because the Amazon River carries so much sediment that extends the river beyond, right, where the river actually finishes. So you have this influence of coastal process into the ocean that can be advocated. So Brazil can advocate it as saying, well, this part is still part of my territory. So it varies, depends of many aspects, and countries need to kind of like study it and bring all the data to approve the area. So the UN is the United Nations. They have departments and people that only work with this kind of issue. So when you talk about the high seas, we're talking about areas that it's beyond any territory. So you're really in the middle of the ocean, or not necessarily the middle of the ocean, but you are in an area that there is no more influence from any continent or from any continental phenomena. So that area, it's called high seas. And even though the UN also has some guidelines, I want to call it guidelines because there is no such a thing as regulations or laws when it comes from it, because you are not really related to any nation, right? So enforcement is a problem. Another thing that's a problem is the capacity to watch the area, technology and human capacity to be able to understand what's going on there and who is there and what's happening there. We don't have it. This is an area where, let's say, countries with economic power, they have access because they have the vessels and the technology to explore these areas. But let's say other countries with less economic capacity and technological capacity, they can't. And when we're thinking about, when we make that analogy that I made before about the same motivations or the same aspects that define why some countries would colonize others, they are very similar to what's happening right here, right now. It's the capacity to go there and to explore the area, basically.
Why is this a problem on the high seas? What's going on?
There can be many problems. We can think about fishing as one of the problems, but we can also think about deep mining, which right now some places are starting to talk about it in a more serious way. We know enough to know that we should be careful. We know enough to know that we need to take a precautionary approach and not really explore it in the way that the technology now allows it to be done. And the risk is just so high, right, for anything to happen, and to all the aspects of the deep ocean that we haven't explored yet from a scientific perspective. We don't know much about the organisms, about the chemical reactions and the components of that environment. We don't know enough. So imagine that now we are going there and we are trying to explore something that we don't even understand from the biological, chemical, and even physical perspective of the ocean. So I believe this someone working directly with deep mining could perhaps have more technical explanations for it, but I would say, in my view, one of the main points is that lacking of understanding that we should be careful, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And, when people think like ocean exploration, I think a lot of people just assume maybe some biology being conducted, whether you're taking water quality samples or maybe checking some chemistry. But when we say mining, I mean, it's like actually deep ocean mining. And because the ocean is so volatile and we don't know all of these different components, it can have catastrophic consequences. And that's one of the main issues with it. And even testing to see if a mine is good in an area, they have to do these sonic blasts, and that can affect all kinds of wildlife, particularly whales and animals that move by sound.
Yeah, and last time I checked, I mean, that was in 2018, the feasibility in terms of even how much you have to invest and how much you are taking from that investment didn't make any sense. Like the amount of money and technology that you need to invest to extract it from the ocean is just so much that what you're taking from it can't justify. So I don't know in what stage they are at right now, because these things, they can change quite quickly. But last time I checked, it didn't make sense even from an economic perspective.
Well, that's a relief to hear, because that will probably drive a lot.
We hope so.
Okay. So this isn't the main focus of your work, though. You look at shipping issues as far as pollution and exhaust gas cleaning and greenhouse gases and black carbon emissions. Could you kind of deconstruct what that is and what that really looks like?
Yeah, I think I would like to start by just inviting people to think about shipping, right? Like, I think we don't think much, but if right now you look around you and you start to think about where the stuff you have came from, you are going to figure it out that almost everything you have arrived to you directly or indirectly via ship. And actually this number is 90%. The UN has a report where they figured it out that 90%, this is huge.
90%? 90?
90% of everything we buy. Yeah. This is a lot. It is almost in everything that we use, consume, and buy, exchange.
I read one of your articles on WWF's website about this, and you were like, even the phone that you're reading this on. And I was like, oh, yes, that's a really good point. So whatever device you're listening to this podcast on, it's from shipping.
Exactly. And, one of these days I even ordered like cake from a friend who is local. And then she sent the cake. The cake was delicious. And then I, just out of curiosity, I asked her for the list of ingredients she used. And I started to search where the ingredients came from. And I realized that, she's local, which makes it local. Please support local. That's not, I'm not saying to not support local, but almost all the ingredients she used came from elsewhere, not even Canada. So that brings you this perspective of how much we are connected to the shipping industry, but we are not aware of it. And we, even though it is, such an important service for our society, it moves that globalization that we have, this global system. It is moved, and it is possible because of shipping. We don't think, or we are not aware of the impact that this industry has in the environment and our lives. One of the works that I do is related to shipping emissions, and shipping, compared to, let's say, aviation, it's not as bad in terms of emissions. But when you think about how many vessels you need to move 90% of everything we have, you can pretty much understand how the scope of this industry in terms of the impact it can have in the environment be neglected. Shipping emissions has not been mentioned or even taken into consideration when we talk about climate agreements, and we need to change it. So one of the works that I do is at the national level, trying to understand how a national action plan for the shipping industry to reduce CO2 emissions and other emissions can be aligned with Canada's goal to reduce emission as a nation, because Canada is one of the signatories of the Paris Agreement. So they do need to report and have plans to reduce emissions as a nation. At the global level, I also work with the International Maritime Organization. It's a UN body that regulates international shipping and also emissions for international shipping. So what we're trying to do at the IMO is to align its goals with Paris Agreement. And Paris Agreement is that agreement where we want to keep global temperature below 2 degrees Celsius and try very hard to get into 1.5 degrees. This is one of the ways that my work with shipping goes, and that is also the pollution stream, right? This is more related to discharge from shipping. And this is a whole word that we could have one podcast to talk about. Basically, if you think about a vessel as a city where people live, where people, in some vessels like cruise ship, you party, you buy, and you stay there for a long time. You also think about how much pollution is generated from these activities and where it goes. So you have the pollution that comes from the laundry machine and sinks, the pollution that comes from toilets. And even though you have a couple of technologies that is supposed to help clean this discharge, unfortunately, new studies have shown that this technology, they don't work at the standard that it should be, and which means that we are basically discharging all of this pollution into the water and contaminating not only the marine environment itself, but the organisms there and the communities that rely on these organisms directly for their livelihood. This is whole aspects of shipping that I feel sometimes we are not aware, and it's neglected because people don't know, therefore they don't talk about it. But my work at WWF and with my team at WWF is to really make sure shipping is included in all of the conversations about climate change and pollution stream as well.
Yeah. So I saw, I think it was in your article, that the International Maritime Organization had a goal of cutting shipping emissions in half by 2050, and that was relative to 2008 levels. How are we doing on that? What are some of the steps that are being taken?
Let's talk about this goal.
Yeah.
I don't think we have that much time, right?
Mhm.
When we think about the state where we are at right now, we don't have that window to trying to decrease it by half in 25th. Uh, it- like we should be aiming to have decarbonization by 2030
Mm.
because we know that after that it's going to be really hard to stop any climate related crisis more than we are living right now from happening. The first thing we think is that this goal could be more ambitious, and we don't think it just because we are environmentalists, but Norway, for instance, and the UK, they have compromised to decarbonize the shipping industry by 2030.
Mm.
If a nation can set goals and targets that will guide them to decarbonization by 2030, we can't understand why the International Maritime Organization couldn't do the same.
Mhm.
Your second question is like, how is that going? Well, unfortunately, in the last meeting we had with the IMO works with meetings that is usually based on topics. So we had the topic related to emissions. And the way it works, you have delegates from different countries, also delegates that represent the industry and that represent NGOs. And WWF was also there. I was attending the meetings, and unfortunately, the agreement we got from that meeting at the end, what that agreement really represents is business as usual.
Mm.
Because countries, unfortunately, I feel like they are not taking climate change at the level of problem that it is, the level of the crisis that we are facing, as they should be taking very seriously. And at the end of a whole week of negotiations and meetings, what we got was business as usual, which means that nothing really changed in terms of emissions from shipping in this first term, which the IMO called the short term.
Mm.
So the IMO divided the ambition into short term, mid, and long term. For the short term, these negotiations led us with business as usual, which means that in the next few years until 2025, what we're going to see from the shipping mission internationally, it's not really making any difference as it should be. And it's not aligned with Paris Agreement, which was one of the things that we really disappointed about.
Mm. Why is it so important to reduce emissions?
Okay, that's great. I think to answer the question, we need to think about why we talk about climate emergency, right? Or climate crisis. I like the word climate crisis and climate emergency more than climate change.
Mm.
And I think
The,
the reason
the
for
right
that is
sense of urgency.
exactly. And also, I think it also gives you the idea that climate itself, the word climate, it's beautiful. It's not a problem. Climate is not a problem
Mhm.
by itself. It's the solution. It's what made it possible for us human beings to live on Earth was a stable climate that we could plant and grow stuff and animals can also survive to the temperature we have right now. The climate we have is amazing. The
Mhm.
problem is that emissions, especially what we call greenhouse gas emissions, which are gases that when they are released and come to the atmosphere, what they do is to basically hold heat, right? So what we are doing is making Earth warmer
Mhm.
than it should be. Well, what scientists are saying right now is that when they project, let's say the projection looks at what we are doing right now and then looks further into 5, 10, 20 years in the future, if we keep doing the same thing and keeping in mind that as a population we are growing, so you have, that projection taken into consideration too, how many people will be 10 years, 20 years from now, we see that these emissions, they need to be reduced. We need to stop them. Otherwise, it's going to be impossible for humans to live on Earth. And this is the big picture, but I like to also bring it to right here, right now, because when we talk about climate change, I feel like sometimes people think this is something in the future, and that's not real. That, it's happening right now. The city that I grew up in Brazil called Salvador, every rain season, you see a community being almost destroyed by these extreme events where the coastline is basically destroyed and the water can get into people's house, and then you have these communities that are already facing economic vulnerability, social vulnerability, having to deal with climate change. And then you go to other island states in the Pacific, same thing. We are talking about whole nation being threatened by climate change, language, culture, memories, people. This is happening right now. This is not in the future. But because it is happening with communities that are not in the front line of the conversation, or unfortunately, they don't have the political power to make the change they need to prevent this from happening, the conversation doesn't get the urgency and the
weight.
yeah, that should have. Yeah, I hope I explained what you asked me. I think I just threw some political stuff there too. I told you that's me.
No, it's a really good point, and to tie it all together, it's a global issue, and the political part is relevant because we're all on one planet and we're all affected by it. That kind of leads me. I always say the conservation ask for the very tippy end, but I feel like right now is a really good spot because as a person, climate change just seems so insurmountable, and there's all these little things that we can do, right? So that's one of the reasons why I asked the conservation ask at the end of each episode. But shipping specifically just seems monumental to tackle as like a one-person consumer. What is something that a single person or a single household can do?
That's a great question. First of all, I think is knowledge and know and have shipping in your mind when you're talking about climate change and industries that contribute to climate change. It's really important to bring shipping to the table of climate change discussion. It is important to make the industry accountable. They cannot just, get a free pass and everyone's trying and the industry just gets like a free pass and they're not doing anything. Second thing is that we are consumers. All that we are buying came from someone or organization that it's in this middle line between us and the shipping industry. So one way that we could affect what's happening is by in many ways that you can always like report to these big organizations. You can always write to them, like it's easy online. You can just go to their website and have like some sort of contact where you can tell them, hey, so what's up with shipping that you use? Like, are you aware of the impact of shipping in the world? What are you doing about it? And when you have these organizations asking you to provide feedback, tell them that you care about the ways that they are handling their products. Tell them that you care about how green the whole process, including shipping, is. Because these organizations, they do have the power to force the industry to come up with solutions to the problems they have. And as a consumer, these organizations, these big corporations want us to keep buying. So our opinion should be taken into consideration. And, more than that, I really think share with people, talk to people about it. Say, hey, I heard in a podcast about like shipping and how shipping is in everything we do, and I never thought about it. And then share this knowledge and let people know, because I think it is the same. We have seen it before, right? We have seen it with like cars, we have seen it even with the straw, the power of knowledge, how people start to talk to each other about the impacts of straw. And suddenly everyone was like, oh my God, I hate straws. No, you gotta, right? You need to have a better solution to that problem. Even people who don't call themselves environmentalists start to not be really cool about straws.
Mm-hmm.
So sharing and empower yourself with knowledge. And when you have the opportunity, tell these big corporations that you care about how they're shipping the stuff. It's, I think, a great way to do something about it.
Really excellent points. We really are butting up on the edge of our hour, but I want to circle back for one more time. For you talked a little bit about emissions. So what are some things that the shipping industry can do, right? How do they modify their ships to make it better?
Awesome. This is such a great question. There are many ways through which the shipping industry can address the emissions problems. One thing that we need to really know is that one vessel can live up to like 30 years.
30 years, one vessel can be
One vessel.
emissions. Okay.
Yes. So you can have the vessel, you bought the vessel. Let's say you bought the vessel yesterday, you have 20 more years.
That's a really long lifespan for something that lives in a very hostile environment. The saltwater environment is not very nice to most things.
Yeah, it is. It is quite long, this is because we have been doing it for so long and developed so many beautiful ways to thrive in that environment. Like, so shipping has many technologies and ways that they can thrive in the ocean. But when you think about this lifetime and you think, well, if you buy something today, it means that by 2025, if you buy today a vessel that doesn't have anything that can support this vessel to not, cause any emissions, in 2050, you still have this vessel. So we need to start right now talking about and investing in solutions, because the technology and the idea is out there, but they need to have investment so it can make it to the market. So you have solutions such as wind for vessels. You have solutions such as, some testing solar panel for vessels. You have alternative fuels. So you can talk about hydrogen cells, you can talk about ammonia, you can talk about other alternative fuels that will not have the same impact as fuels that we use today, that are fossil fuels. But one very important point about it is that we need research and development, and to do so we need to invest right now, and we can't just expect the industry to do its part, right? We're talking about here also policies change and governments also investing in this technology so they can support the industry to make that transition, and have industry willing to try and willing to support the technology and the solutions they have. Therefore, I think we can get there much faster than we do if we don't have this type of investment. Because again, if we don't do it in the next few years, by 2025, we still have vessels that use fossil fuel in 2050. Right? So we're not getting there. We are not going to reach the goal of decarbonization by 2050 at all.
Gotcha. I'm sitting here thinking of initially when we went to this conversation, I was like, oh, you could do carbon scrubbers, but you're talking about completely different methods of powering the boat. So this is like several 100-foot long ship. But you mentioned wind. I'm picturing like little wind turbines throughout the whole deck. And what would be really fun, right? They have dams, like hydropower. Could they use the kinetic energy from like the movement of the ship to like create more energy to power it? I don't know. People listening to the podcast that are more engineering minded. Things to think about.
Yeah, you know what I saw today? I was just watching a documentary today, and I saw a vessel that had a kites that people just used,
Mm.
and this thing hanging there was producing energy to move the vessel. So, there are so many, engineers and all these beautiful people out there with great mind and ideas that need to have investment to try it.
Yeah.
And also, there is another thing that's very important about this conversation is the investment on land. So there is a study showing that 80%, so 80% of the investment we need to make the transition for the shipping industry has to happen on land.
Mm.
Because, when you see a vessel and stops at port, it needs to recharge. It needs to have whatever it is using. If it's hydrogen, if it's like solar power, if it's like electric vessels, which is like a huge promise, you need to be able to plug in. You need to be able to plug at port, and then again, the energy that you are getting has to also come from a clean source. And you can talk about solar, whatever you want when you talk about land power, right? But this is a very important aspect that on land you need to invest much more to get there than in the vessels itself.
All right. That's a really good point too. It's
Mhm.
twofold. It's not just out on the high seas, it's also in port.
Yeah, exactly. And this has been also one of the things that we're working at WWF now is to understand how ports can support decarbonization and what they can do to make that transition happen for vessels in Canada and all over the world as well.
That's wonderful.
Mhm.
So before we end today, one of my very, very favorite questions to ask is what is one of your favorite field story or stories to tell? And this can be, growing up on the ocean, some of your memories from the ocean, or some of your current professional experiences. Could be an amazing day that everything went right. It could be a day that everything went wrong, but it makes a really great story now. But yes.
Oh, okay. I have a very wild one. So before before I made my way to a more political and science-based desk approach to conservation work, I was actually an activist and I worked for an organization where I was in the front line protesting, like always Pacific protests. I've never been really into.
Is this upon Greenpeace's ship Rainbow Warrior? We didn't even talk about this, and I wanted to talk about this.
Yeah,
Okay.
this is exactly that. I think if you Google my name, you're gonna find this, which is really crazy.
Okay.
But well, I was in this vessel, and basically I worked in this vessel as a deckhand for almost 4 months. I traveled the South Atlantic Ocean, so many places in Brazil, including the Amazon region and also Argentina, Uruguay.
Could you just back up and explain a little bit about this ship? I had no idea. Like, I know Greenpeace, and I know that they're an international organization and they fight for the environment as a whole. And I had no idea that they have Sea Shepherd-esque type ship roaming our seas as well. Could you just kind of explain a little bit about the Rainbow Warrior?
Yeah, sure. The Rainbow Warrior was the first vessel that was actually planned and made for Greenpeace because Greenpeace has other vessels, including one called Esperanza, which is a vessel that was bought, an old vessel that they just adapted and do the work with this vessel. Rainbow Warrior, though, was an old vessel that they had before. That then the vessel was just like, too old, and they planned and built this new Rainbow Warrior. So this is a sailboat. It can work, it's hybrid, but can work 100% only with wind. It has very cool technology. For instance, say all the water we used in the vessel, it came from the ocean and went through like a treatment that they had, like a type of technology inside the vessel that would treat the water and would drink and use this water for everything. And a fun fact about it is that when we were traveling in the Amazon River, we couldn't really use that technology because, rivers, they have so much sediment and pieces of things that you couldn't really take that water and in the use that water. So was a fun trip in the Amazon River because we'd have to actually take bucks and get the water to take shower. So it was quite wild traveling there. But this is the story of vessels for Greenpeace, and basically what these vessels do, it's going to different ports and serve as a base to show Greenpeace's campaign in that specific country where they are. In Brazil, for instance, when I was in this vessel, we had a campaign related to the Amazon forest. What was happening there is that there is a thing called pig iron. And this is a material that is extracted in the Amazon and goes to North America and Europe, and it's used in the industry to build, for instance, in laundry machine. The way that they're doing it in Brazil was very disturbing because they were basically using people who were working to extract this material. They were always slaves. They would take these people from villages, most of them like natives that lived in that area and was, in a small village. They would go there and say like, listen, we got this job for you in that place, we're gonna pay well. These people would go, and then when they would get there, they would say, well, we paid for your trip here, we pay for a place for you to stay, for your food, therefore you own us, we don't own you. And these people work in conditions that was like not human at all, was really bad. As you can see, I was passionate about this campaign because again, it was two things in one, like the deforestation to produce this material combined with the social aspect. And I felt like, okay, this is what I really believe when social issues and environmental issues are combined.
Really quickly, often they are. It's amazing how interlinked they are.
I think in everything they are, right? We are humans, and the problems exist because we create them. What I did, and this is my funny and not so funny for my mother, for instance, when I say that, is that I lived in a hanging in a very small platform made of wood that was attached to the anchor. Yeah. So we attached a very small seat made of wood with like 4 pieces of rope on each side, each one of each side. We attached it to the anchor of this vessel, and I lived there for almost 20 days.
You lived in like on an anchor shed. You made yourself a little hut of an anchor.
Exactly. And the idea behind it was because this specific vessel was traveling to that port in Brazil to be loaded with that material, right? And what we wanted to do was to stop them from getting this material, therefore would create some sort of problem, especially financial problem, because these vessels cost a lot of money when they stay there and they're not really traveling. And after the 20th day, and with the support of so many people, we had actually people, actors and actors from Hollywood even coming to hang there with me at a certain point.
Where was this anchor actually located?
Was in a city called, in the bay, close to a city called San Luis. It's a huge vessel. If you search for this, if you put like my name, probably put like something like Greenpeace or something like anchor or the pig iron, or you put any of these like keywords, you're gonna find it. It's a huge vessel. This was actually a vessel that could break ice. So it's the type of vessels that are very, very big.
Okay.
So they were anchored close to the port because they did not have permission yet to go to the port, right? So vessels sometimes they have like they have to wait outside the port until they can actually go there to be loaded. So when they anchored in that bay to wait for the time to go to the port, I climbed the anchor a bit, and then I put my little thing there, my cat, yeah, and I stayed for the next 20 days. We were afraid they would like, I don't know, have like water throwing at us, but they were really nice. The crew at the vessel, we actually offered them food and stuff because we want to make sure that the 20 days we're stopping them from go to the port would not stop them from getting food and water, anything they needed. But I was extremely happy with this campaign because after the 20th day, we left the vessel and we went straight to the port and stayed on the pile of peg iron. And the government was just like, oh my God, we got to do something about it. And the companies in Europe and North America also started to say, wait, what's going on? Why suddenly all my clients are talking about how bad I am because of things you were doing in Brazil? Like there is like a little girl like being held in a vessel. What's going on? And the pressure was just so much that they sign a compromise to stop deforestation and also to align the workforce with all the laws and criteria they should be aligned to, and to make sure the people who wanted to go home could go home and not be held there as slaves. So was very intense and it's not always that we can participate in such a thing and see it ending up well. So I was extremely happy to be there and see it unfold in such a great way. Everyone was extremely happy with the outcomes.
That's amazing. What a cool story. I actually just pulled this up on the web. It's an article from 2012 on Greenpeace, and it's right now, a 20-year-old Brazilian named Elisama Menesez is attached to the anchor chain of a massive cargo ship. Yeah.
Yeah, they were like, I think the moment they saw, like, I'm a short girl, right? I'm not tall. So I think the photos made it, and videos, if you find it, made it look like very like, oh my God, someone take this little girl out of this thing.
That's one of the lines. She's a small girl anyway, but next to the 175-meter Clipper Hope, she looks absolutely tiny.
Oh my God, I forgot that they actually mentioned my height. Yeah, okay, yeah. Yeah, I think that made people like, I received so many letters, you have no idea. People were really cute and nice, like all over the world. People would send me letters and they're like, hang it there, we're gonna go, you're gonna fight it, we're gonna win. And I'm like, oh my God, thank you so much, everyone. But it was beautiful being there. Like some people asked me, so how did you feel? Like it was so peaceful. I was in my element. Was really nice. Yeah.
That is an amazing story, and I love that it wasn't just you sat on an anchor chain to make a point, but it actually really made a difference, and that's really special. So very cool. Thank you for doing that.
Thank you for having me and asking these amazing questions. I had so much fun.
Yeah. So if the audience wants to find you, connect with you, where's the best place to do that?
Well, you can email me if you want. It's my first name, Elissama, and my last name, Menezes, all together at gmail.com. You can also find me in LinkedIn. Like I actually have many people message me in LinkedIn asking me about how do I get into, conservation work? And I I always respond for like every single message. So it's also my name, Elisama Menesez. Twitter, same, Elisama Menesez. I'm also on social media. If you tell me, I don't have like an open account, but if you tell me you heard me and you want to follow me, I am so happy to have to have you around if you want to, exchange information about anything, pretty much environmental work and being an international student in Canada. I've received a lot of this question as well.
Wonderful. And I'll put a link to all of this in the show notes as well.
Awesome. Perfect.
Well, Elissama, Ellie, it was really wonderful chatting with you. Thank you so much for being on the show.
Thank you, Cara. I had so much fun and I cannot wait to hear it. I think, yeah, my first podcast. Thank you so much for this opportunity. I really appreciate that.
Absolutely.
Hey, do you want to help the oceans? Have you considered a career in marine biology, but maybe just aren't sure where to start? Head on over to my website, marinebio.life, and subscribe to my newsletter. When you subscribe, you'll receive a free PDF download where you'll learn the 7 steps to becoming a marine biologist without the degree.
Thank you for listening to today's show. I'd love to hear any insight you've gleaned. Leave a comment in the show notes or send me an email over at marinebio.life. If you enjoyed this episode, leave a review and of course, share with your friends. If you want more resources for ocean news, including conservation topics and careers, plus personal insight from me that I just don't share anywhere else, join me at marinebio.life and sign up for email updates. Keep after your dreams and making waves in your community. One person can make a difference. Thank you so much for listening, and I'll catch you next time on the So You Want to Be a Marine Biologist podcast.